What America was and what it can become. This is Liberty Town Hall.
Thanks for being here at Liberty Town Hall. That's Glenn Wilson. I'm Greg Marshall. Appreciate you being here today. Today we're going to talk about voting. One vote can change history, my friend, and sometimes one vote can't make a difference at all. We're going to talk about the whole thing a little bit today. Glenn, voting is so important, and yet at the same time, these days, it is so frustrating at the same time. I think you'd agree with that.
Well, you always hear about the seat being won or lost by just a few votes. They get right down and count the actual votes. I remember in Michigan here, there was Landslide Dan, where he won by 5 votes in a primary. So literally one vote does make a difference. And at the other side of the coin, you hear the frustration from people like living in California, where their vote doesn't really matter. That state's going to go blue no matter what they vote. So some people feel disenfranchised, and other people don't realize how important their vote really is. So
yet in California, think about this for a second. There are places, not many, I understand that. It is a 2/3 majority now on the Democratic side, for example. But at the same point, there are some places where other parties get in, and at least they can still, even in a situation like that, be a bully pulpit, be throwing the shame on them to the point where sometimes that gets out in the media. And Glenn, it makes a difference as far as what people do and say and how they push things forward and so forth. I mean, it's important.
I think people should take the responsibility of voting as well. Everybody says it's our right to go vote. Where's your responsibility as an American that's got to pay for the bills and the results of these votes? Don't you owe your children the responsibility of being an educated voter and do your own research on these candidates? That's a lot of work that most people don't want to do, and yet one vote is so important. It's mind-boggling.
Think about it for a second, though, Glenn. I mean, realistically, and you need to think about this too, you don't have to do as much as you think. I mean, Glenn's right. It is some work to learn about candidates and pay attention to the issues going on, but it's easier than ever. I mean, we live in the age of information where you couldn't, I mean, when Glenn and I were growing up as teenagers and in our 20s, I guarantee you couldn't find a ton of information about anything compared to what you can right now. Even in libraries and so forth, it would just be almost impossible.
You can't just pull it up on the internet or your iPhone or your Droid or whatever and say, oh, well, this is how he voted in the last term in office, or this is what he wants to do. I think a lot of people are stuck on the sound bites that come out of the mainstream media. Well, he's going to do this, he's going to take away this, or he's going to do this, or he's going to give that, instead of doing their own research. So people blindly go down and vote, and one vote makes all the difference, Greg.
And you know, the big thing is too, keep in mind, guys, as you take a listen to this stuff, one vote does make a difference, and it's important, and we hope that you'll continue to play in the process. We're going to talk more about voting when we come back. Thanks for watching Liberty Town Hall. Glenn, a moment ago, as I put on the glasses of truth so I can see everything, I was talking to you about the frustrations we've had with this last election. I mean, voter fraud has been rampant. And we know it. I mean, but not just for the Obama administration. There's been plenty on the Mitt Romney side. I mean, there's a video that's went viral on YouTube showing one of the states where you do total touchscreen voting. And what they did is they actually, no matter how many times they pushed President Obama, it switched over to Mitt Romney. Yet at the same time, to bring it up, the Cleveland and Philadelphia votes are becoming very famous. I think Cleveland had something like 19 precincts. I think Philadelphia was 24 that had all of the votes for President Obama and 0 for anyone else, not just Mitt Romney, but any of the minor candidates. How in the world are you going to convince me that there wasn't even one person who had enough feeling for the other side? And yet we just take that and we don't come up with anything.
I think it was Megyn Kelly I seen a special where Megyn Kelly was talking about how is it possible that no one in these districts voted for Governor Romney, that Obama received 100% of the votes of some 20,000 people in, was it 19 or so precincts, right?
Or even more importantly, there were precincts, and a bunch of them throughout the country, that actually had between 108 and 140% turnout. That means more people voted than there were physical residents there. And we keep letting this happen. This happened in 2008. This has happened all the way back into Clinton's elections, is when they first started becoming famous, the 1992 election. There is a film out there that a Miami television station heard the League of Women Voters, or the League of Voters Who Dress Like Women, were actually sitting back and counting votes, and they heard, and the television station heard that, oh, they're cheating for Clinton. They snuck up the fire escape, had a camera, flipped the door open, and here's these women in a semicircle with so many hanging chads on them, it looked like it had snowed all over their dresses, with ballots in their hands, all going
Punching
like...
them out.
I mean, it was scary. Think about that. And we keep putting up with it.
And yet one vote makes a huge difference, and it's so important for everybody to get out there and vote. And they feel totally disenfranchised when they hear about voter fraud. So on one hand, we have the absolute importance of everyone voting, being as educated as possible, understanding what the ballot proposals are, who the candidates are for their local offices as well as their state and their federal offices. It's so important that we explain to people that their vote does count. And then at the same time, depends upon where you're at, your vote might not count at all. Really, maybe a vote for the other guy even.
Well, keep in mind, the more people vote, the harder it is for these different organizations on both sides of the big parties and anywhere else to pull a fast one. The more people vote, if we have 90 to 95% voter turnout, it will be much more difficult. It can be done, but it becomes more difficult the more people actually participate in the election process. So does the answer of, oh, does my vote really matter? Does one vote matter? Glenn, the answer is yes.
I say
it
matters immensely.
Yep.
Except
History proves it over and over again. Well, fraud, even with fraud, again, it becomes harder to do it the more people participate. Now, I'm pulling this from the Liberty Sentinel. It's a very nice publication. Let me give you a quick look at one of their publications here. Liberty Sentinel's out of Georgia in the Atlanta area. Go look up on the net and figure out how to grab it. I think you'll be fascinated. They also send out a PDF that you can get for free to check out their publication. I think it's really interesting. I'm going to give you a little bit from the article here I think will make sense to you. In a close presidential election, the winners can be decided even by a small number of voters. Few of us will ever forget the hanging chad recount, as an example, in 2000 of the presidential election, which came down to a handful of ballots in Florida.
You're sitting there holding them up going, ah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Check this out, though. History throughout is full of voting issues. Let me give you some. 1649, Glenn, one vote caused Charles I of England to be executed. One vote.
One vote.
1776, one vote gave America the English language instead of German.
Right, one vote.
One vote. 1800, one vote gave Thomas Jefferson the presidency over Aaron Burr. One vote.
One vote.
1845, one vote gave Texas and Washington State statehood. 1876, one vote made Rutherford Hayes president. 1923, one vote gave Adolf Hitler leadership of the Nazi Party. Some of those are good, some of those are bad, obviously. But
it shows the power of one vote, absolutely.
Absolutely it does.
Absolutely it does.
Now, you know, many people think the 15th Amendment guaranteed the right to vote. But I'll give you this one. In 2000, there was a ruling where the Supreme Court declared it's the state legislators that wield the power to decide who is qualified to vote. Are you aware of that? Each state can decide qualifications. As a result, voting's not a right, but they say it's a privilege granted by the states and withheld at the discretion of local and state governments. I don't totally agree with that comment. I think voting should be a right for everybody. And if it isn't, we can throw a fit and demand on our states. But the states can determine the parameters
but
with which
it's not a right for everyone.
As which they show.
If you take, for example, someone that has a bad run in life, commits a crime, they're convicted of a felony, they pay their debt to society, but from that point on, you can't vote here in Michigan.
Well, it depends. Yeah, in Michigan, that's true. In other states, it's different. I mean, it depends.
You've lost your right to vote because you made a mistake in your youth, and now your whole life here in Michigan, you're cut off because you have that on your record.
But remember, that goes back to the state qualifications. Other states do it differently. Other states, as soon as you're done paying off your debt to society, then all of a sudden your rights, including voting and even holding a gun and so forth, are restored. It just depends on where you're at. And for all sorts of different rights, including what we're talking about here.
But when it comes to the vote, these people are really disenfranchised just because they made a mistake in the past.
That's true.
And I really don't see how that's a good idea for anybody.
Well, then we need to talk about what states are in that position and maybe encourage people about that, let them know.
Well, in the next segment, I want to talk about the last election where it was supposedly a good, solid win for Obama yet. But when you look at it at the detail level, you start breaking it down by county, what's the picture of America really like, even though he won this election?
And it'll be more of the same when we continue on Liberty Town Hall.
And welcome back to Liberty Town Hall. We're talking about the election and just how important one vote is. Greg, as we look at the election and they do red state, blue state on, what states went for Obama, which ones went for Governor Romney, the country looks almost divided. But if you take and you break it down and you look at it by the county and you did a red-blue map according to county, you would find that the entire United States is red except this very fringe around the outside in these major metropolitan areas, maybe downtown Denver, Cleveland, stuff like this. Other than the very heavy metropolis areas, it's red. I mean, we are basically a red country that's being driven by a very minority around the edges there.
We're a red country in land mass. But remember, population-wise, for example, rural to urban is a 60-40 spread. Now, that's not counting just the cities. For example, Detroit is a very small city right now, but the metro area is the 11th largest in the country.
Right.
So,
and it sucks Michigan into the Democrat column every time.
No, not like it used to. Used to, but that's stopping now because
it's
the
slowing
massive
down.
population loss. Those areas, remember, are starting to lose population, the ones who are falling away. Now, there's plenty of others who are making up for this. Chicago is a good example. New York is a good example.
Either way. But there's two states that divide up their electoral college votes based on congressional districts. Now, if we were able to do that, and we were able to get all 50 states to assign their electoral college votes based on their congressional districts, it would be an overwhelming sweep of conservatism in this country.
Well, I wouldn't even agree with that. It'd be an overwhelming sweep of Republicans.
Oh,
the reason
okay,
I say that, and you know what I'm talking about.
I give you that.
Not every
As
Republican.
an independent that doesn't care about either party.
You understand what I'm saying. Not every Republican is conservative, and very few now, but there still is a few Democrats who aren't liberals.
Yeah, right.
Believe it or but I don't believe anybody in leadership is today.
Right.
But I think they have purged anybody who's the Blue Dog Democrats or the Reagan Democrats, so forth. But still, there are some in the rank and file.
Just like you hear a lot of people talk about the fact that the Republican or the Democrat Party isn't the same as the party that our parents had when they grew up, where a union was actually something that cared about the workers more than the power grab and
also cared about retaining jobs.
Retaining jobs,
the
right?
Recent
the actual
Hostess
workers,
Twinkie
right?
Thing is a great example of that. I mean, recently Hostess Twinkie, or not Hostess Twinkies, Hostess Bakery, rather, forgive me, has announced that they're liquidating the company and going out of business. 19,000 jobs lost, and the unions were warned, if you cannot make concessions, this company will collapse, and it has to. There's no other choice.
And everybody will be out of a job.
And they voted to continue the strike anyway. Hostess is gone now.
Isn't that amazing?
I mean, that's just sad.
So I think if we can get some breaking up of these electoral college into congressional districts, I think we'll have a better chance of slowing this progressive movement down anyway. Maybe it won't stop it from going off the cliff altogether, but it will slow it down to the point where we can get more educated. No, I think it's more time where we can actually educate the public and let them understand where our concerns are as a nation. All this debt, our wars we're fighting all over. Look what's going on in Israel now. Now you have Egypt switch to the Muslim Brotherhood, right? So you have all these changes going on globally, and you have this progressive movement coming from the UN and small arms ban treaty coming out.
UN Covenant on the Rights of the Child.
There you go,
that's
right?
Scary.
So I think if we can get the conservative base of this country a little bit more of a voice by breaking up the congressional districts, I think it will slow us down to where we have more time to educate and turn it around and get more educated voters. That's my goal.
I feel like right now, Glenn, the Liberty Movement, as it has been for quite a while, literally, if you can picture it in the theater of your mind, we're really hanging off the edge of a cliff, hanging on, looking for a toehold. That's really how desperate times have become, I'm afraid.
Well, people don't understand how the Tea Parties were formed all over the country. It was like a spontaneous eruption. Well, picture this. You sit down talk to your friend and you say, wow, did you know the government was doing this? Or did you know the government was doing that? Well, and then you start talking about it, and then we call our other friend over, and now we got 3 people talking. We say, you know what, let's get together Tuesday night at such and such a place, and we'll get together and we'll have a meeting about this. And then we start bringing our friends. Now there's a Tea Party that's formed right there locally and like spontaneously erupted, but it's not in touch with the other Tea Party or the other states' Tea Parties.
That's still true to an extent today.
Which I think is one of the fundamental problems.
But it's also one of the fundamental benefits at the same time, because the Tea Party has no head. There's no head cheese that you could go
and that's
use
so
as a target practice.
That's so important. You can't take down the Tea Party because there's no head to take down. But at the same token, there's no leverage or synergy of the Tea Party to stop the other agendas from taking place.
It becomes a mob synergy. There's so
Right.
many people mad that we're fearful to make the next step, meaning the progressives and so forth, that are pushing for planetary government and other ways to stifle liberty in the world.
We're going on assignment to, let's say it's a private invitation only of Tea Party leaders from throughout the area. And we're going to go down there, we're going to actually interview them as to what their plans are to get this cleaned up. So when we come back, I'd like to summarize what the Tea Party's role in the one vote would be, Greg.
We'll talk about that when we come back. There's more to come. Check out our website for information on this and past programs and a lot of different features on the site. We'd encourage you to check it out daily because things keep changing. It's libertytownhall.com. Again, that's libertytownhall.com. Our final thoughts when we come back. Hope to hear from you as well. This is Liberty Town Hall. We were talking about voter turnout and why things matter. I mean, let me give you some recent examples. I don't know if you know this, the 2004 presidential election, it wasn't that long ago, had the largest percentage of voters since back in '68. It had 126 million of the 216 million at that time that were eligible to vote. That's 58% were actually casting their ballots. That was a pretty good turnout for the United States
That
in
was
those
a
days.
great turnout. That's a by far record.
But these voting numbers were far exceeded in 2008. When 64% of the vote turned out then. President Obama received more votes than any other presidential candidate in history. Now, part of that is because the population keeps increasing, so you think about it.
But the percentages are still the percentages.
Mm-hmm.
It did increase.
Exactly. Presidential candidate, and he won the presidency by 10 million votes over John McCain. Compare that with Mitt Romney's election. He won by less than 800,000.
Right, and I'm not even so sure that's a valid 800,000.
Oh, I don't think it was either. We talked about some of the situations been going on with the voting fraud. It's been terrible. The problem is, how do you defend Mitt Romney? Look at the situation they did in the primary and at the conventions.
I don't understand why
ridiculous.
Governor Romney didn't hammer Obama on Benghazi. That's infuriating to me.
He had so many ways he could have done that. But at the same point, with voter fraud, it's just tough because we know this election, both sides did it.
Right, and that's what one of the frustrations are coming out of the Tea Party is that they feel like they're being disenfranchised because maybe they're diluted in their vote and their voice so much. So I think is what they're trying to do, and they're using this show as a platform for it, and I welcome all Tea Parties to comments at Liberty Town Hall, get a hold of us. We want you on the show, but I think is what they're going to try to do is organize in such a way and pick like the top 5 things that everyone's going to agree on. This is a goal. So if a candidate meets this, and then even more importantly, I think they're going to try to target particular districts in the country so we can actually hire someone that has a label or a party that says Tea Party or whatever name they come up with. I believe that's their goal.
So a national vetting process.
They're trying to make their one vote count the most. That's exactly what it is. They're trying to get that one vote that makes all the difference in that right area so that we can get that done. But a national vetting process, absolutely.
I'm going to throw one more by you. Who didn't vote? That makes a difference too. Back in 2008, the election, we learned, are you ready for this? 30 million Christians didn't vote in 2008. 30 million Christians stayed home.
Why?
Many are now expressing regret, but guess what? Did not regret enough. Millions didn't show up again. There's too many people in the Christian community, Glenn, who forget that this is important. And so they start thinking, well, we don't need to get involved in the secular world. Wrong, as John McLaughlin would say. Wrong!
Wrong. You have to live with it. So, you know, maybe we need to work harder at getting absentee ballots to some of the seniors so that they can vote.
This is not necessarily all seniors either, Glenn. We're talking about Christians, period.
So people
Christians
have no
can be
excuse
young.
to take that day or that time to go down and do it. They're just not doing it.
They're just not doing it. They're not showing up, and we've got to encourage them to do it. We're out of time today. I wish we had more. Check us out. LibertyTownHall.com is the television website. Hey, while you're at it, check out my radio show. It's 3 to 6 Eastern at patriotvoice.us. I'd be glad to hear from you there as well. And join us next time. I'm Greg Marshall. He's Glenn Wilson. This is Liberty Town Hall.
But what do we mean by the American Revolution? Do we mean the American War? Revolution was effected before the war commenced. The revolution was in the minds and hearts of the people, a change in their religious sentiments, of their duties and obligations. This radical change in the principles, opinions, and sentiments and affections of the people was the real American Revolution. A letter to H. Niles from John Adams, February 13th, 1818.